When thinking about my journey of why I left the Roman Catholic Church, there is so much for me to communicate, including my parents being concerned that I was leaving the religion and joining a cult, my nonna being incredibly disappointed in me, and a Catholic priest telling me something that made me realise that it was time for me to leave the Catholic Church. But first I'm going to take you right back to the beginning. So I grew up in what I would call a nominal Catholic household or a cultural Catholic household. My grandparents went to the Mass weekly. I went to a Catholic primary school, a Catholic high school. I partook of the sacraments, baptism, reconciliation, communion, confirmation. I attended church on special occasions, as many nominal Catholics do, Christmas and Easter. And I just had this general identity that I was Catholic in some sense. Now, my earliest memory of me actually desiring the things of God and identifying with this was when I was about 8 years old, and my parents asked what I wanted for Christmas. And I was in one of the bookstores and I found an illustrated Bible that I wanted for Christmas. And I remember telling my cousin this, and he couldn't understand why an 8-year-old would want an illustrated Bible. But this is one of the earliest signs of me, just something inside of me seeking after God. Through primary school, I believed in God in general. The school did teach scriptures. I remember in year 7, one of the teachers, we would read through the Gospels. And I remember picking up the Bible a number of times and starting at Genesis, Exodus, and then stopping at Leviticus. But that's sort of a bit of my early background. At home, I had a collection of rosary beads, of little cross icons, or whatever you would call them, pictures like of the Pope, a little statue thing of the Vatican, and I had this in this container, and it meant something to me. There was just something that I was interested in, those sort of spiritual things. When I got to high school, I went on a European tour, which included visiting the Vatican. So I got to see all of that. And by that stage, I had firmly considered myself to be a Catholic, even though I was very much a nominal Catholic. I remember even the thought crossed my mind of maybe that I would be a priest, which is crazy for me to think about looking back on that, given that religion wasn't even my main interest. I mean, I was more interested in sports and things like that, but there was something that just did interest me. There was obviously something happening inside of me. I remember in high school winning the prize for religious education, 2 years. This was at the Catholic high school. I remember interacting with one of the priests there and discussing the Catholic faith. So there was just something inside of me that was really seeking, as I've said. Now, when things really started to go deeper was when I actually left high school. So, I mean, up until this point, I sort of thought to myself, I generally believe in God. I've tried to read through the Bible. I believe that the Bible is true, but I don't agree with all of the parts of the Bible, basically because I wanted to live the way that I wanted to live. But coming out of high school, I actually, for the first time of my own volition, started to attend the Mass. And I started to attend the Mass probably monthly. It was about once every 4 weeks. And then this became once every 2 weeks, and then this became weekly. And I attended the Mass weekly without fail. During this time, my dad started coming with me, and then my sister started coming with us, and then my mum started coming with us, and we were all going to the Mass together weekly. This happened over a period of time. And I remember during this time getting more involved in the church as well. I remember catching up with the priests, having conversations, them talking about the Catechism. I remember a priest giving me a really beautiful sort of leather type book with the 4 Gospels in it, and I really just treasured that and looked over that with interest. I remember there was a day when around Easter time we were carrying a giant cross down the road to the Catholic Church. And what was interesting is I remember it vividly, and then coming back in through the church there was some things that were up at the front of the church, and one of those was actually a picture of Mary. And I remember people bowing down and venerating this image. And what's interesting is even back then, that was strange and uncomfortable to me, which is really interesting given my Catholic upbringing. I did have some rosary beads at home, but I mean, I never prayed the rosary and I never prayed to Mary or anything like that. So that's just something that's interesting. Now, during this time when I was getting more involved in the church, I would be part of the procession that would come up to the front with the priest. I would do readings during the Mass. I remember having meetings with some people there, and we were looking at potentially starting up a youth group in the Catholic Church. So my interest was really growing, as well as catching up with the priests as well, as I've mentioned, to discuss these matters of faith. Now, it was around this time when I'd probably been attending the church consistently for a couple of years. Someone invited me to an evangelical church. So before I was invited to the church, I was invited to a night where some of the guys were catching up around my age, would have been around 20. And I really enjoyed that time. It was really nice. And then they invited me along to the youth group, and that was quite different to the Catholic Church. They had the songs playing. It was more like a concert. They had like actual preaching and stuff. So it was all very interesting experience for me, and it opened my mind up about Christianity outside of Catholicism. And then from there, I became closer friends with these people. I started attending the church on Sundays as well, and on Wednesday nights. Now, what I did is I pushed back the Catholic Mass to 5 p.m. on a Sunday. So I was going in the morning at 11, and because I wanted to go to this other church, I was going to the Catholic Mass at 5 p.m. And the more I started learning at this church, I was starting to hear more of the Bible than I had heard previously. And the more I looked into it, the more I studied the Bible, the more I started to realize that there were some things in the Catholic Church that I thought were not quite right. And this is over a period of time of maybe another couple of years again, or a year and a half. I was in this place where I was researching, I was looking into things, and I was torn. My identity was Catholic, there's no doubt about it, and I believed that a salvation came through the Catholic Church. But I was being torn, and all of a sudden I was no longer excited to attend the Mass, but it was relegated to 5 o'clock, and I was going because I felt like I had to. I felt like it was my obligation. I felt like I wanted to show my family that I was going, and I honestly felt like if I left the Catholic Church, I would lose my salvation, which I didn't even realize. I wasn't saved at the time. I didn't even understand the gospel. So this is what happened during this time. And then I came to a real crossroad point where I'd done research, I'd looked things up, I got out the Bible, and I recognized there were things in the Catholic Church that didn't align. Now, I know the Catholic Church has 3 sources of authority: the Bible, the Magisterium, which is the Church's teaching authority to authoritatively interpret Scripture, as well as the sacred traditions. But I always just felt intuitively that the Bible was the objective source of authority. And I made a list of Catholic teachings and the teachings at this other church, and what does the Bible say about these things? And more I was leaning towards the fact that the teachings at the Catholic Church were not aligned with the Bible, and this tore me because my identity was as a Catholic. I felt like I had a lot invested as a Catholic, and there was a real pull during this time, a real uncomfortable pull inside of me. The doctrines that I disagreed with was things like the claim to the one true church, the papacy, the position of Mary and the saints, purgatory, salvation by works, all of this sort of stuff, the Eucharist, transubstantiation, the bread and wine literally transforming into the body and blood of Christ, and him being represented each week. I couldn't sit with that. So what I did was I'd actually met with the pastor of the evangelical church, and I met with a couple of the priests. Now, before this happened, my parents started asking questions. They were concerned. They said, why are you leaving the religion? They could see that I was attending this other church all the time. And they said to me that, you know, we've seen this stuff on TV, just whatever you do, don't give money to this church. They are a cult. We've seen it on TV. And I sat them down and actually said to them, look, I've come up with a list here. This is what the Bible teaches. This is what the Catholic Church teaches. Which one do you agree with? Do you believe the Bible is true? And they said yes, even though they didn't have any understanding of the Bible. It's just, one of those cultural things. You identify as I'm a Catholic and the Bible is true. And they were put in a position where they couldn't really answer me with logic. And then they actually attended an evangelical church just to check it out, to see what it was like. So during this time, as I said, I met with the pastor, I met with the priests, and I was really at the stage where I felt like I was wanting to leave the Catholic Church, but I just couldn't, because I would lose my salvation, as I said, and my identity as a Catholic. When I sat down with the first priest, who I'd caught up with a number of times, he said to me, Matt, I told him what was going on, and he said, it would be sad to lose you from the Catholic Church, but there are other genuine Christians out there, and you need to go where you feel led. Which was surprising. I didn't expect that, but it was a great comfort as well at the same time. Now, this other priest, he was an older priest, Italian priest, and as soon as I told him about looking at attending this other church, he very strongly says there is only one church, the Holy Catholic Apostolic Church. And he was very defiant about that, basically dismissing all of these other people. These are people that I'd caught up with, that I knew were passionate about seeking after God. And he's basically dismissing all of that. And it was at that point that I thought to myself, you know what? There's not one church organisation that is the one true church. That was a real turning point for me. And I realised, you know what? What Catholicism is promoting is not true. It's not biblical. And I made that painful decision to leave the church at that point. But once I left the church and I'd made that decision, which I'd been wrestling with internally for a long time, I felt a freedom. And there was that cognitive dissonance, but when I overcame that hurdle, I felt free from it. My nonna wasn't too happy. I remember her calling me. It was actually on my birthday one year. And she said to me, old Italian lady, Matthew, why are you leaving the religion? Why are you changing religion? You used to be such a good boy up the front of the church, reading the Bible, all of that. And I remember I just became angry, because I was like, I'm trying to seek after God. I've made this difficult decision. You don't even know the Bible. You don't even know what you believe, what the Catholic Church believes. Of course, I didn't say any of that, but I just felt frustrated at the time that someone would speak to me that way after everything I had gone through. Of course, I understand now the different perspectives, but so that's what happened. And then from that, my sister left the Catholic Church and started attending the evangelical church with me, and my parents left and started attending the church as well. And from there, I began to go deeper and deeper into the Word. Ironically, that actually led me out of that church, because I realised that particular church was a seeker-friendly church, and my whole family has left that church and are planted in a good gospel-centred church. Since then, I've gone on to do a Bible school. I started to consume sermons and some of the great Christian works over the centuries, and just grew in knowledge of the Bible over time, until more and more I came to the place where Christ became everything, and it all became about Him and about living for Him and doing the will of the Father. And I'm so grateful for His faithfulness through this entire journey. So that's my story of leaving the Roman Catholic Church. And here I am today, preaching the truth of the gospel on YouTube, something that I never would have imagined years ago. But it's not surprising now, having spoken about my journey. So I don't know what your journey is, where you're at, but if you're someone that is in the Catholic Church, I actually did a video where I talk about some of those doctrines that I disagree with, doctrines that are false and unbiblical doctrines. There are many sincere and genuine people in the Catholic Church, but there are many lies that are being believed in terms of these doctrines. So that's actually a really in-depth video. It's over 50 minutes. I'm going to put that on the screen, and I'm going to put it in the description. If you're someone that is at this point where you're weighing up the truth, leave your comments below. Let me know if you have any questions for me, and I hope that this was helpful for you. Always follow the truth of the Word of God, wherever it leads you, no matter how uncomfortable it is. That is the lesson that I've learned. And in that place, there is incredible freedom. Leave your comments below. Look forward to talking to you soon. God bless you.